Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Midtown Scholar Bookstore's welcome to the 9th annual Harrisburg Book Festival hosted by the Midtown Scholar Bookstore. My name is Alex. I'm with the festival, and as always, I am live in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania at the bookstore for our virtual events. Before we get started this evening, I'd like to give the book festival a solid plug while I have you here. We had our second day of our outdoor tent sale with over 10,000 books priced at $1, $2, and $3, which will take place every day through Sunday of this week across from the bookstore in the grass lot. The bookstore will be open as well, and we'll also be hosting a virtual event every evening through Sunday. If you're local or regionally located, we'd love to see you. This is a huge time of the year for the bookstore. It takes a lot of work and preparation. So please, please, please come out, support your indies, buy Monica's book, and we hope you come away with another book or three after this weekend. But at this time, I'd like to introduce our speakers here this evening. Our interviewer this evening is Helene Wecker. Helene's first novel, The Golem and the Jinni, was awarded the Mythopoeic Award for Adult Literature, the VCU Cabell Award for First Novel, and the Harold U. Ribelow Prize, and was nominated for a Nebula Award and a World Fantasy Award. A Midwest native, she holds a BA in English from Carleton College and an MFA in fiction writing from Columbia University. Her work has appeared in literary journals such as Joyland and Catamaran, as well as the fantasy anthology, The Djinn Falls in Love and Other Stories. She currently lives in the San Francisco Bay Area with her husband and children. Of course, our featured author this evening is Monica Byrne. Monica, get this, grew up in Annville, Pennsylvania as the youngest of five. She studied biochemistry at Wellesley, NASA, and MIT before pivoting to fiction and theater. She's the author of the novel The Girl in the Road, winner of the 2014 Otherwise Award, and Monica's short stories and essays have been published in The Baffler, The Atlantic, The Washington Post, Religion Dispatches, Wired, Tor.com, among many others. Of course, Monica's new novel that we are here for this evening is titled The Actual Star. I've got to read just a couple blurbs here. New Scientist says it's a stone cold masterpiece, and it's been described as David Mitchell's Cloud Atlas meets Octavia Butler's Earthseed series. Some quick housekeeping before we get started. If you have a question for Monica or Helene, please use the Q&A button towards the bottom of the screen below our faces here. We'd love to hear from you, so ask away at any point, and we'll try to get to as many questions as possible towards the end of the program. And lastly, if you are interested in purchasing a copy of The Actual Star, we'd love for you to purchase it through the Midtown Scholar Bookstore. Once again, that is the #1 way to support the festival, this event series, and the bookstore. For all of our festival books, we are offering free media mail shipping with discount code HBGBookfest. So look in the chat room in just a moment. I'll provide a link there for you, or simply head to hbgbookfest.com. Again, free shipping with code HBGBookfest. But now, without further ado, the Harrisburg Book Festival presents Monica Byrne and Helene Wecker.
Well, thank you. I am absolutely thrilled to be here, to be talking with you, Monica. This book, I read it. I've been following you for a while, read your first book, knew this one was a long time coming. When I finally read it, it was the book that I was like, I would like to stop people in the supermarket and be like, I'm sorry, could I interest you in a book called The Actual Star by Monica Byrne that's coming out in a couple of weeks? Because it's one of these books that just sort of blows your head apart and puts it back together again. It is a book about a journey, about journeying in the largest sense of the word. This book also has had a journey. So I know that you're going to read a passage right now, but I'm one of my favorite passages, actually, I just found out. And so please go ahead and do that. And then we will come back and we will talk about this amazing accomplishment of yours.
Well, thank you, Helene. And for those of you who don't know, Helene also just published a book called The Hidden Palace, which I was interviewing her about a few months ago and was similarly gushing about how good it is. So her first book is The Golem and the Jinni. Her second book, the sequel to it, is called The Hidden Palace. And we're going to have a lot to talk about because a lot of our tomes have things in common just in terms of how much research we had to do. But
Mhm.
also buy Helene's books because they're incredible and you will be set for the fall. Like buy my book and her 2 books and you will be set for the fall.
Oh,
So
that'll take you through to like New Year's.
yeah, you'll be fine. You'll be good. Okay, but I'm gonna read a short passage from the actual star. So to give context for this, Leah is a Minnesotan teenager. Her biological father was Maya. Her biological mother is white. She grew up in Minnesota. She's never been to Belize, where her biological father is from. And she has come there for the very first time after having saved money for 2 years to travel by herself to be here. And she doesn't know what to expect, but she comes into a sort of euphoric state. So this is her wandering around San Ignacio in western Belize in a euphoric state. Leah wandered up the hill to look over the town and watched while the last of the mist disappeared. It became hot and bright again. This caused her constant amazement. How bright it was here. How absolute the need for sunglasses right away. It was the first thing she'd bought. Belize was blinding her. This was a good thing. It was going to be a good day, as good a day as she'd ever had in her life. She wondered again at the intensity of her happiness. She'd never known she could be this happy. As if this place, its warmth and humidity and salinity, was calibrated to that of her own blood, so that the feeling outside finally matched how she felt on the inside, and she could swim down the streets as easily as walk them. She'd expected to feel culture shock, but she felt the opposite, that Belize was far more normal than Minnesota. Or, what was strange about it was precisely what made it familiar. Leo only wanted to eat Belizean food, learn Belizean history, speak Belizean languages. She began to hear music, a solemn twinning of horns and drums. She turned into one side street and then another, looking for the band, but the music always seemed to come from behind her rather than in front of her, and she got turned around and lost, and soon found she was back where she'd started. It sounded like a funeral march of some kind. She saw police in riot gear practicing formations in a soccer field. She saw vultures folding over a dead dog in someone's backyard. The dog was splayed in spectacular fashion, limbs outflung, teats exposed. A boy on a bike watched closely for her reaction. She made a face like a tragedy mask, and he nodded back, as if reassured. She entered a park crunched across the sun-toasted grass, and sat on a bench painted green and yellow. She listened. The phantom music petered out. Now there were just the sounds of cars, reggae, and children too young for school. She'd been here for less than 24 hours. She felt like she'd been here for a year. She was transformed, and all she'd had to do was get up and go. What if, she thought, travel itself could become a religion where the rituals of wandering became the essence of the faith? Each node of the journey, like the stations of the cross, performed and revered. Each person searching for that place on earth where the outside matched their inside. And now she felt she was in her own promised land. Her guidebook said that all of western Belize was one continuous ancient Maya site. Her ancestors were beneath her, and deeper beneath them were the caves. Xibalba was underfoot. A pack of dogs trotted by, circled, and stopped. They'd been seen by another pack of dogs at the other end of the park who were also circling. Many soap operas going on here, thought Leah, among many species. Soap operas seemed the term that best fit. In Minnesota, everything was dull realism in black and white. Here, everything was a bright fantasy in vivid color, with hot passions bubbling up and over like the spurts of a volcano, cooled by sudden ink-blot storms. She touched her braid. It was hot from the sun like sheet metal. She thought, I am here. I am actually here at last. There we go.
Thank you. Thank you for that bit of the book.
You.
There's a clue to the larger structure of the book buried in there in that section where she's imagining a religion in which wandering is what is prized, a religion based around wandering and nodes like stations of the cross. So we have in this book a story that is 3 stories, that is the same story in some ways, that is told in the distant past, the Maya that are Leah's ancestors, and Leah's journey, and then the distant future where Leah has unknowingly influenced an entire human society with her trip to Belize. So can you take us back to the beginning of how this came about, and just tell me, how did this come about? Because it's the sort of book where it's like, where did she even start? Where did you start?
I went to Belize because my mother, who maybe some people watching knew, Marianne Byrne. So she traveled to Belize in the 60s, in 1963, and she was a papal volunteer. So that's like the Catholic equivalent of the Peace Corps. And she taught gym. I think she taught gym, and I think she taught English in Belize City, and she loved it so much, and she never got to go back before she died. And so for me, it was a sort of pilgrimage on her behalf. Like I would go see, the places that she had been. And I planned, that would be it. That would be just sort of duty done. But I went, and it immediately felt so familiar in such an uncanny, unexpected way, and nowhere more than in San Ignacio in the western part of the country, where there is a very famous cave called Aktun Tunachil Muknal. And this cave is famous because, first of all, because you can just walk right into it. You can hike up it for miles by just like walking and swimming up a river that it is safe to walk and swim up. It feels like a ride at Hershey Park. Like that was the first thing. I was like, am I in a gigantic Hershey Park ride? Because it feels like Canyon Rapids, Whitewater Canyon Rapids. It just feels like it was made for us in a very weird way. And the ancient Maya felt the same way. They treated it as the entrance to Xibalba, the underworld. And there are like 18 known human remains in there of 18 individuals, but like probably hundreds more that were washed away or that were deposited there over thousands of years. And when we came out of the cave for the first time, so they run tours there constantly. When I came out of the cave for the first time, I was just like, this is a whole novel or play. And weirdly, my first instinct, because I was writing a play at the time, was that it would be a play. And it would be a play that took place simultaneously on 3 levels. So yeah, like an actual stratigraphy. So the set would be like and they would intersect at various times, but it would be like a symphony. So the strings and then the drums and the percussion, and they're all complementing each other, so that it would be a play, a very challenging play. But then once I started thinking about it and thinking about sort of the enormity of what I wanted to convey, it started becoming a novel, and being a play seemed like a very naive proposition. So yeah, so that's where it started. I wanted to communicate my intense desire to reconcile all time and everyone who had ever been in that cave at one moment, and the novel is the result of that. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. I knew you'd gone to Belize. I didn't. and I knew that you had like gone to the cave, and in fact, you dedicate the book to the gods of the cave, which is like a really cool thing. It's like, oh my God, that's really metal.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, I just dedicated to my kids, like the gods of the cave.
The last one was
Um,
dedicated to my parents.
okay, fine. Um, but so amazing. So after that, and you know, you go through the whole play, which I can see that, like, that would be so cool to try to work that out. But then when it became a book, um, and I know that you had a process where you were trying to figure out like how to interleave the past, the present, and the future. Can you talk a little bit about like the mechanics of how you ended up doing that, and
So
how like how you organized it, I guess.
so it was originally not going to be interwoven one novel. It was originally a trilogy of three separate books, three
Mm,
separate short books. So Jeff Vandermeer's the Southern Reach trilogy had just come out, and I loved it. I was in love with it, and I'm pretty sure he had sold it on the basis of Annihilation, the first one, and
mm,
then had written the other two. Like basically as the first one was still coming out, I was like, okay, that's what I can do. um and we tried that, and to a person, every editor said something along the lines of, this is amazing, but we can't see the whole thing. Like we can't get our heads, because even if I wrote it down in a proposal, it was just so big, like as you have alluded to, that they were
mhm.
like, we don't trust you to write this. um and as much as I hate to admit it, I'm glad that it was rejected at that stage, even though it sent me into total despair. um, because one of the editors suggested that I interleave all of the narratives into one book in a braid. And so I started to do that. And I I mean, color coded index cards were involved, and reshuffled many times. And I will just say it was very hard. It was very hard, and took many years. I projected that writing the other two, writing the rest of it, however it would be, would take 1 year, and it took 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
um, just because, yeah, the interleaving, but also, multiple drafts of the present and the future timeline also. um, but it's sort of, I mean, I'm sure you experienced this, where you go at it over and over and over, and are finally like, if it's not good enough now, it never will be.
Yeah.
So might as well let it go. Yeah.
Yes. At some point, the torture must stop, and you have to get it out into the world. But I was giggling at your color coded index cards, because at some point there is always color coded index cards. It's like
Always.
index cards, help me.
Yes. Well, even if you're writing from one POV, it's like to indicate various strands of narratives that you have to advance at various points. Like that's what screenwriters call breaking story, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Exactly.
Did you use color coded? What did you use them for? Now I
Oh
want to
my
know.
God, I
Did you
used
use color coded?
everything. I used everything. I had the index cards. I had the Scrivener digital index cards. I think I had post-its that I'm sorry, my dog wants to be a part of this. I had the God, I used mind maps. I used flow charts. I used everything. And it was, I don't know if any of them were more useful than others. It was like more about just straightening my brain out in a particular moment. And, every time I wrote an outline, it got completely trashed and whatever. And maybe that was, it's like the thing that you need to build so you can destroy it, but at least you have something to destroy that gets built into something else. So,
Absolutely.
but yeah, it's a ridiculous process that never seems to get any easier. Um, so sorry, the dog threw me. Um,
That's
you
totally
did you
understandable. Dogs would throw me too, especially puppies. Helene has a puppy, everybody.
yes, he is an adorable puppy, and he's getting bigger, but still a puppy, and so he's very large and rambunctious. But anyway, so as part of that organizing and the story cycle, you have these characters that we see in different, I don't want to say different iterations, because they are very much their own characters, but they are also very much based on an archetype that is, sort of that you explain at different parts of the book, that there is a triad that sort of repeats through history. There are different points in the stories that mirror each other, in decisions that are made, in personalities that clash against each other. So how did you choose which elements you wanted to sort of repeat through these three different um, cycles of the book? And were there ones that you like had to take out because it was like, oh, this is just too much at this point? Or did you feel like you were writing the same story three times? Because that's what I would sort of like worry internally. Like, I'm just telling the same story three times, which you don't. You absolutely don't. I was trying to figure out who my favorite characters were in the book, and each one, each cycle, it's a different person. So it's like obvious that like these are not just the same characters repeated three times. These are just three takes on like what these base personalities can change into given different times. And I should shut up and let you talk.
No,
But anyway,
no, I love this. But I got the idea from Kim Stanley Robinson's The Years of Rice and Salt, which, for those of you who don't know, is an incredible novel that covers something like 1,000 years of human history, and it's an alternate history based on what would have happened if the Black Plague had wiped out 99% of the European population instead of only 60%. And what happens is that the Chinese, Muslim, and Native American empires are the ones that take over the earth and become most influential on the earth. And it's utterly fascinating. But in this alternate history, three characters signified by the letters B, K, and I recur over and over and over. And I told him this, like, he's a friend, and so I wrote him, I was like, Stan, I'm doing this thing. Is it okay? Can I credit you? He's like, do it. Like, that's lovely and generous of him. But the archetypes that I had in mind from the very beginning were that X was an intellectual genius, J was a physical genius, and E was a spiritual genius. And those were the the north stars of each that I guided each character by. And that's why, for example, the future world religion, La Vieja in 3012, the ritual tradition is credited to Javier, the J character, and the intellectual tradition of La Vieja is credited to Xander, the X character, in 2012. And Leah is the most polarizing character, which I really enjoy.
mm-hmm.
I love her so much, and because of her absolute certainty in herself, which is I actually read biography of Joan of Arc while I was revising, and Joan of Arc, I mean, there are many things that can be said about her, but one of the things is just like how utterly certain she was of herself in a manifestation of self that was so counter to everything that was around her. She was just so convinced. And Leah, like a 17-year-old girl telling a nun, don't worry about my sleeping with lots of boys, there's nothing wrong with me. Like, that is like, and how certain she is of that. Like, there's nothing wrong with me. Like, Catholic guilt has nothing on me. And never
It's such a
did.
great scene. She's like patting this nun's hand. It's like, it's okay. You don't, because this nun is just struggling, like visibly struggling to try to explain to her that, your body, your female body is precious and must be, protected and not, defiled or whatever. And she's like, it's okay. There's nothing wrong with
Yeah.
me.
She's like, "Oh, I know. I just express it differently than you do." And like that's sort of what I wished that's the self possession I wished I could have in high school because I mean, again, I don't know who's watching or who will watch this later, but I went to Our Lady of the Valley, now defunct, and Lebanon Catholic, now defunct, K through 12. So I had 12 years of Catholic high school or Catholic schooling, period. And those scenes in Minnesota are straight from my
Mhm.
life in Catholic school. Down to field day. So they split up into three teams. Team God, Team Jesus, and Team Holy Spirit. It was Blue and White Day. We split up into Blue and White Day, which are Mary's colors.
Okay.
Yeah. So we didn't quite go quite so far as the Trinity, but
Oh, thank God, because I thought you hadn't made that up, and I was like, what? They really did that?
I would not put
Wouldn't
it
put it
past.
past him.
No, not at all.
Wow.
Rural
Wow.
Catholics can be super fascinating.
Yeah. Irony proof.
Yeah, right.
I shouldn't say anything as okay. So, because I wanted to talk about Leah and just how fascinating she is, and I'm not surprised to hear that she is one of the more polarizing characters in the book. But one of the things that she does in the book that is basically you learn at the very beginning is that she does end up, this journey ends up inspiring this future religion that the entire world, social system is ends up being structured around. So did you create that? Which came first, or did they sort of come together? Was it Leah or La Viaja, which is the religion that she inspires, or did you sort of work them to meet each other as you were
It
working
was
on the book?
2012 definitely came first. I
Okay.
knew only that whatever happened, just because there needed to be a direct through line. I mean, I love millennia spanning novels, but what frustrates me a lot of the time is that the threads are very thin to non-existent, and that I wanted no there to be like a direct cause and effect, like 1012 caused 2012, 2012 caused 3012. um
Mhm.
and so 2012 was by far the easiest to write because I I've been back to Belize something like 7 or 8 times at this point. I have dear friends there. I just, and with their permission, uh, based characters on them. They're apparently getting their copies tomorrow, and like
Oh, wow.
I know. I'm so excited finally because it's just, it's been such a long time because it has to go through Texas, blah blah blah. But anyway, I'm so excited for them to read it. But I 3000. Oh yeah, 2012 was the easiest to write because I just lived it. And I just took
Mhm.
so much of Leah's journey from my own impressions and my own feelings. Um
Mhm.
and 3012 was by far the hardest
Oh, okay.
because yeah, by far the hardest because I didn't even have research to go on. I really
Uh-huh.
just had to make everything up. Everything. Um, 1012 was easy to write because I had tons of research and be like, okay, they didn't um the ancient Maya did human sacrifice, or they didn't give oranges for sacrifice. They gave hearts and
Mhm.
blood. That's what they gave for
Mhm.
sacrifice. Like I have constraints there. Whereas in 2000 or in 3012, I had to make up all of my own constraints. And our shared agent, who is wonderful, Sam Stoloff, absolute wonderful agent. He read the first draft of the 3012 timeline and pointed out rightly that there was no conflict in it. There was no,
Oh.
it was really boring. Like nothing really happened. All of the sort of, there was like a climactic event in the middle and then it just sort of fizzled out. And just, it was just, so I had to go back and revise it. I revised it in one very intense month, March 2019.
Oh boy.
In one very intense month. And basically said, like, okay, there have to be stakes. And the stakes are the religion itself. Like,
Well, yeah, I was gonna say there had to be stakes, and then it's like, oh my goodness, it's the whole entire like society that feels like it's about to come crumbling down because there is this character that has committed a heresy, and the heresy is going to be challenged, and then everyone, the entire society, is taking sides, and it becomes it got like really uncomfortable and scary of like, my goodness, these people are about to go to holy war, and so you constructed an entire holy war in a month, so good on you.
Thank you. There were certain times when I was like, oh, right. Like all of those cliches about storytelling do have some truth to them. Like you
Yeah.
need conflict and you need cliffhangers and like there's parts of me that shouldn't be snobby about that. Like because that's how good storytelling happens. But I had
Mhm.
to, retell myself like, oh no, you actually need these things. You need these anchors. Yeah, it can't
And
all just
you've
be pretty
also,
sentences.
yeah, but your book has so much philosophy in it at the same time. And I think that's the key, right? It's like it can't all just be, chases and wars and people fighting. What are they fighting for? And what they're fighting for is an entire way of life. And that way of life gets dissected over 3,000 millennia. And, even going back to, the origins, it, just going all the way back to the Mayan time. So I wanted to ask about that, about you were talking about briefly the research process, but how much could you, I mean, I know there's just not much left that's like direct observations of Mayan society. So what did you have to go on and what did you end up having to fill in?
There basically I read a lot of academic papers. A lot of
Ah.
academic papers. I mean the Belize Valley um archaeological research project. I forget the exact acronym, but there's been a lot of research, archaeological research done in the very area that I'm talking about, Western Belize.
Hmm.
And I read all of those papers, like every paper I could find. Every paper that examined, especially that was contemporaneous with the population of the ancient Maya in the book that I was writing. Because the Maya they weren't a monolith. They were uh, dozens, maybe hundreds of city states that were all at war with each other, and certainly found a lot of things between themselves to fight over. A lot of differences, and so it wasn't just one massive people. The ancient Maya means like people, well, a people to this day, but like from 2000 BC to present day, with many, many, many iterations and many city states and many idiosyncrasies. So,
Mhm.
this particular population in my book, there is even less than there is about other populations, but I wanted to stick with it because of the 1012, 2012, 3012 mirroring. And
Mhm.
2012 was important because it is the turn of a Baktun, which is the a big cycle. And as you may recall, in 2012, December 21st, 2012 was when the world was supposed to end.
Yeah.
Um, which was not true. It was just a misreading of the Maya calendar. But I wanted to go back and be in Belize for that, so I could observe the tourists who really did think that this might be the end of the world and were super excited and were buying up, $1,000 packages travel tourist packages to like go observe a real Maya ceremony on the night that the world was supposed to end, and that was all very amusing and very good material.
Yep.
Because I do not go lightly on tourists in the book, and including myself, I might add. I am a tourist, so um, and now I forget the question. Oh, just research.
Yeah.
Yeah, so a ton of academic research, but also I borrowed from a lot of proxies.
Mm.
And that included even just the mentality of blood sacrifice. Um, One of the most useful uh, books in that regard was actually Death in the Afternoon by Ernest Hemingway. So, Death in the Afternoon is a book about bullfighting. So, totally different, unrelated culture from across the world, from much different origins than ancient Maya human sacrifice. But the romance of breaking down a marked animal was very important in trying to understand how the ancient Mayas saw their sacrificial victims, which was this really eerie paternalistic relationship where they groomed them. They groomed them to die, basically, and feted them, celebrated them also at the same time. So it was just a way of sort of breaking down, marking them, breaking down their identity, and forcing them into the communal narrative that, like, oh no, you were captured, you're a victim now, you belong to Shbalba. Sorry, you're eventually going to have to get around to that. And how the Spanish treat the bull in the bullfight, that tradition was very illuminating, and how they regard the
This is
bull
like
with
an honor for the bull, like you are honoring the bull by killing it in the ring.
yes, and there is a weird love for the bull
Mhm.
involved in its torture. Like it's
Yeah.
crazy. Yeah.
And that it really comes through in the mind sections and the way that the captives are treated, which it gives it a really, like, there's a certain, like you say, romantic horror about it, that I found totally fascinating. So this is making me want to read Hemingway now, because
Oh,
that's
read that book. Oh, it's
okay.
fantastic. Yeah.
Okay, I haven't read that much Hemingway because, but
Yeah. He's
yeah,
problematic.
he's a dude. But okay, so one last question, and then I think we're going to open it up to audience because we are
Okay.
reaching 40 minutes in. But and this, I'm springing this on you, but I don't even know if you'd have an answer. Do you have a favorite character in the book, or like a one of a few favorite characters in the book that, like, who just popped to mind?
I will say Nilu was the easiest to write.
Oh,
Nilu is the
interesting.
heretic.
Yes, yes.
Nilu is the
And
heretic. Yes,
a
go ahead.
sourpuss, and she is like a cranky academic, and I loved her from the minute that I started reading her. Sorry, go on. I'm just tossing my stuff
Good.
in now.
No, totally. I just like at end, opposite, Tanaj was by far the hardest to write. So Nilu was the easiest to write, Tanaj was the hardest to write. These are the two opposing, clashing characters in 3012 for everyone listening. And Jay, Tanaj, is the physical genius, and Nilu, X, there's an X at the end of her name, is the intellectual genius, and they're against each other. But Nilu's acerbicness and just impatience with everyone around her is something I can really relate to. Just and I think that's a part of myself that I've just annoyance with everything that I have a healthy sense of humor about. And so I can get in touch with it really easy. Like rage and anger, period. I feel like I have a great relationship with anger, and Nilu is very angry. And
Mhm.
so it felt very easy to write her from that perspective. I just feel like I can really identify with her impatience. Like, hey, world, we need to change right now. No, we can't wait right now to suit my dreams,
Mhm.
my personal dreams right now.
Mhm.
And she's really annoyed when she encounters resistance. And boy, I can relate to that.
She encounters a lot of resistance, and she has a hard time not shooting herself in the foot by getting so like worked up about it that she can't even like describe what it is she's trying to talk about. And no, that felt very, very I felt I was incredibly sympathetic to that. Like I could just like put the right words together and throw them at you, then I would knock you over and you would see sense. Like
Yes.
that she's that kind of character.
Well, she loses the argument in the very first chapter in which she appears, and it's devastating because
Mm-hmm.
Poot is the name of her opponent in this one, and Poot is so insufferable. And Milu loses to her, and it kills her. So yeah.
Yep. So I think we will be, yes, there you are. Hello.
Hey, hi.
Hello.
Okay, so thank you, Monica. Thank you, Helene. This is just a wonderful conversation. To our audience members out there, if you have a question for Monica, please use the Q&A button towards the bottom of the screen below our faces here once again. And of course, I've got a plug. If you'd like to purchase the actual star, visit us in person through Sunday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. We're open, or look in the chat room. I provided a link there for you, or simply head to hbgbookfest.com. Okay,
And I should add, if you want to ask a question of Helene, also please feel free because I'm just saying, sorry, I can't help it.
we actually do have some questions for both authors, so
Oh, good. Okay.
there we go. But we're starting off strong with the hometown question. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. This one's from June. June says, how did growing up in a small, very conservative town influence your growth as a writer, good or bad?
I would say good. I would absolutely say good. And it's I mean, I think back to my childhood in Anvil and how incredibly safe it was. How idyllic in a way that's hard to imagine now. I don't know, what it's like growing up in Anvil now, but when I grew up there, it was, you know, okay, I'm going out to play, I'm going to see my friends, and we would all just like get on our bikes and ride around for a couple of hours at dusk down the alleys and to the old softball field and to the AC pool playground. Um, and we would just come back at a certain point, but it just was so safe and so pleasurable. And I was so free to, I mean, this is a large credit to my family, to just live in this incredible Victorian house and read to my heart's content, where there were bookcases everywhere. And my dad was a professor at Lebanon Valley College, and my mother had a master's in theology. And so, two intellectuals and, talking about Latin at the dinner table. But it was just like such a safe, good, nurturing place to raise children. It was also a blue island in a larger conservative place. And I think I didn't feel it much just because my own family was such a safe space. And my next door neighbors, the Feathers, Phil and Judy Feather, were such a safe space. They were the only Democrats elected within like 10 square miles. Like, And so I lived in a tiny blue bubble in a red in a red area, but it just was a wonderful, safe, beautiful place to grow up.
Mhm.
Yeah.
This next question is from Corey, who I think you may know. Corey says, since this is no longer something you see as a play, do you see this being adapted another way? And follow up, do you think you ever would have gone to Belize if you hadn't heard your mother's stories about it during your childhood?
I never would have gone to Belize otherwise. I mean, I just had no reason. I was going there for her, and I think that there's a larger spiritual purpose to that, you know. Just like that was her telling me, that was me following in her footsteps, and she was just like, just wait, you know, there's a lot more here than just where I went to, where I taught. um but yeah, no, in terms of adaptation, yes, I want it to be a limited miniseries and I would write the script, and like that's all part of the plan. And you know, I just an hour ago had a meeting with my managers, my screenwriting managers, and like that's all just like of course we want that. And that would be so awesome and so fun. And this is the kind of project that has the same big scope that a lot of studios are looking for in the Game of Thrones vein, or just in terms of scope. So fingers are all crossed for that.
This next question comes from Laura. Laura says, who was your inspiration for Ket? Is she you as a child?
There are definitely elements of her as a child in me. One of them being that she is the youngest child, and that she has these two older siblings whom she deifies and wants to play with, but they often don't have time for her. And I don't want to neg on my older siblings because they were lovely, but I was 7 years younger than all the rest of them. And so when I got to tag along with them, it was like the most incredible thing ever. And I wanted to make them proud and I wanted to impress them. I still do. Like, I feel like I say this tongue in cheek, but I feel like everything I do art wise is like me bringing a drawing to my older siblings and like putting it in their lap, and maybe like, good job, Monica. And I'm like, okay, I could go make the next thing because I have sibling approval. But yeah, that aspect is very much part of me, just where I loved and adored my older siblings, and they became my default parents, especially because my mom got sick when I was 7, and so they became even more important. And Ket's parents disappear, so when the novel begins, the three Maya children, the three Maya royal children, both of their parents have disappeared. And so that sort of imprinting on older siblings in the absence of a parent was all very familiar. Yeah.
I typically don't read comments, but I got to read this one from Karen Feather, who says, come back to Anvil anytime. He says, the next generation of feathers will provide you with a safe blue space.
Karen was my neighbor. Oh, wonderful. Hi, Karen.
This next question is from Emily. Emily says, for both authors, can you talk about your writing routine? When and where do you do your best writing? Helene, do we want to start with you for this one?
Yes.
Oh gosh. That's a really tough question, because it is so dependent on like what else is going on in my life at any particular time, and where I am in the writing process as well. I mean, lately, the writing has been right here where you see me, in my bedroom. And it's, you know, I'm just sitting here at the desk and typing. But I tend to work when I can in coffee houses if I need to just get away from the house, because I do have 2 kids with a lot of like, you know, there's a lot of just day-to-day needs. And so there are times when it's like, if I don't leave this house right now, even if they're not here, it's like the pressure of the laundry, the pressure of what are we having for dinner, the pressure of you know, whatever else is going on. It's like, if I don't get up and leave right now, I'm going to end up doing that, and I cannot end up doing that because this is the time that I've set aside for writing, so I will leave. But at the same time, like, my book was due last year, during it was due at the end of the summer. And I live in Northern California, and we had a giant heat wave in the middle of a giant smoke wave. So but before that, I had ended up, you know, we're doing all the homeschooling and the distance learning and all of that, and my husband's like working from home, so it's just 4 of us in the house. my book is due. It needed a lot of work. I set up a tent in the backyard and just sat in the backyard and worked. And until it got too hot and smoky, but like for a month, literally I was out there just with like sweat pouring off me, just typing. I had an extension cord, I had a fan, I had, so it's just really, for me, it was just like, whatever works, that is what I am doing that day.
Yeah.
And it just depends.
You do what you need to. I mean, there's the Jonathan Franzen story about him like putting an Ethernet cord in his laptop and sawing it off so he can never and like disabling the Wi-Fi. But I mean, my writing routine, I do the best writing here in my apartment. I've basically decorated and constructed my apartment to be an ideal writing space, and I have not one but three different writing spaces for different kinds of writing. I have, this is my large study, and then there's the micro study where I do intensive concentration stuff next door, and then there's the kitchen table where I do things like taxes and social media. So it's just like I if I'm working on something, my routine will be I get up, I write morning pages, which are journaling. I answer emails, and then I turn everything off for a good 6 hours. And then I turn things back on, catch up, have a glass of wine, and watch and start watching something, and then go to bed. And it's just very monastic. It's a very monastic ritual after that. Yeah.
I'm going to plug your Instagram because I love, it's like, what movie is Monica watching tonight? And it's always the shot of your legs and then the movie. And then everyone chimes in and says, you haven't seen that yet? And she says, I'm sorry, I haven't seen it yet. And it's just, it's one of the best Instagram accounts to follow is Monica's.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yes.
Another process adjacent question, this one from Anonymous, but they say, for both authors, again, overcoming writer's block, how to maintain motivation, and how to figure out where to take the story next when you're stuck.
Go, Helene.
Honestly, overcoming writer's block and how to maintain motivation, I think, are sort of, I don't know, they feel like different facets of the same question. Honestly, it's grueling, and for me it really is just, well, treat yourself well, give yourself a little mental permission to be stuck, and that's fine, and maybe read a book that you love, because that always helps. But just otherwise, it's got to be about putting your butt in the seat and just writing, even when it's crummy, even when it feels like every single word is like the least inspired word on the planet, and you might as well be typing with like elephant hooves or something, and it's like nothing is coming out, because it really is true that the only way through is full. The only way out is through. And that's what you have to do in order to get something that then you can look at and say, okay, well, obviously this is crap, but this like three word phrase here made me feel something. So let's look at that. And what was that? How to figure out where to take the story next when you're stuck that's when I start pulling out the mind maps and the outlining software and the index cards and all of that. So honestly, any trick that you can think of. And sometimes it's just like the weirdest idea will take you down a road, and maybe that's not the right road, but it shows you where the right road actually is. So yeah, it's the longer you do it, the more mental tricks you develop, honestly.
The more mental tricks, and also the more you remember that you've been in that place before and you got out and you can do it again. But two of the best metaphors I've ever heard for writing a novel, one of them is inching forward in a car in fog at night, in fog that you can only see a foot ahead of you, and that's all you'll ever have. You'll be able to see a foot ahead of you in the fog, and that's it. And the other one is trying to being in a dark room, a room in total darkness, and feeling your way through all the furniture. And you have to keep like remembering where all the furniture is, and the lights never come on. You just have to memorize the room and memorize where everything is by just feeling your way forward in the dark. Um, I to get unstuck, one of my favorite things to do is, so actually you can see it. There is a bookshelf. Like each bookshelf is sort of dedicated to books I keep on hand to unstick myself, and this is one of them. And I take something off the shelf that is similar to what I'm trying to do, and I just open it to a page, and I read through it, and I just think these are just words. They're they're just a collection of words. This author was exactly where I was at one point, and now I'm reading them in print. So I can do this, you know? That is just the reassuring, like, oh, these are just a collection of sentences. I'm also writing a collection of sentences. The magic, the utter magic that I felt from this book just comes from collections of sentences. So also have faith that when you finish and when it's in a reader's hands, that magic will happen in their head too. Even if it doesn't feel like it on your end right now, just have that extra bit of faith. Yeah.
We've got to wrap up soon. I'm going to take the last question here, but also I have to make a couple comments. We have a couple comments here of people that want you to come to Harrisburg. So I'm just like plugging that in here.
Definitely coming to Harrisburg, yes.
But last question, most importantly, what is the next work in progress, and perhaps where is it located?
Well, Alex, it's located in Annville, Pennsylvania. So the next novel, tentative title is Ordinary Time, and it is a surrealist love story set in Annville. And so I have a couple of fellowship proposals out to fund going back to Annville and staying at the Patriot Inn, which is a bed and breakfast in downtown Annville, which actually happens to be owned by a family friend. We didn't know this. Like, this is how small Annville is. Yeah. And I haven't talked with him for a few months, so I don't know if he sold it or whatever because COVID was weird. But my goal is to go back to Annville for like a week in each season, because this surrealist love story takes place in a world where you wake up one day and it's January 3rd, and you wake up the next day and it's November 28th, and you wake up the next day and it's July 30th. The seasons change from day to day, and that's one of the most important aspects of it. So I want to go back to Annville, and I also want to try walking around Annville on a hallucinogenic, because I want to go deep into the surrealist aspect. And I've only ever done one trip, and it was totally transformative. And I really want to see how my utterly familiar hometown appears under the influence of a hallucinogenic. And I will use that because I love using novel research as an excuse to do things like this. It's like, let's make novel research as interesting as possible.
I want to see you deduct the acid on your taxes.
I'm not going to call it that. I'm going to call it
supplies. Office supplies.
Right.
All right, we got to wrap up. Monica, congratulations. The actual star. Visit our website, hbgbookfest.com, or look in the chat room. I provided a link there, or simply come into the store. We're open through Sunday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. each day. We're also hosting the outdoor tent sale across the street, $1, $2, and $3. Once again, the book is The Actual Star. Helene's book is The Hidden Palace. You can buy that as well. Thank you to our audience members. Thank you for everyone who tuned in. Thank you for your questions. And I'd just like to hand it off back to Helene and Monica for the last word.
Thanks, Monica. Thank you. for writing the book. Thank you for having me be your interviewee tonight. This was an absolute blast.
It absolutely was. And I knew it would be too. So this is special for me for a lot of reasons. So thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good
All right.
night.
Bye.